So at Canvas, we took a deep dive into this phenomenon that is much talked about on multiple panels and in reports, and it's this phrase that's used, fandom, fandom, fandom. And obviously it really is the underpinning of almost everything. It's the 1,800-pound gorilla in the room, because obviously it's expressed often through sport, but it's not limited to sport. But what we've done is we've really done a massively deep dive into the science of fandom, the benefits of fandom, the orchestration of fandom, the depth and breadth of fandom. And we've looked at it actually from lots of perspectives as well. We've looked at it obviously from a brand perspective. What is the gestalt of what you can do and how you can get amazing business results out of it, but what, is this fourth generation of, if you like, activation around fandom. But we also looked at it from the platforms and obviously the media companies. We looked at it from the leagues, and even, so it's a massive ecosystem, and everyone wants a bit of that fandom.
So Paul, with that in mind, everyone wants that fandom. I know your sports report explores how fandom shapes brand strategy. What's the most surprising insight about the way consumers engage with brands through sports that you saw in this report?
So we've been doing these sports reports for about 4 years, and this year we really we had multiple topics, and we obviously wanted to stimulate quite interesting discussions across the board. But I think one thing that was emerged from obviously the years is kind of the parallel between, if you like, fandom and, without being blasphemous, religion, kind of this congregation, the notion of, the entities can sometimes be the church, but the congregation are really the fans. And, the parallels in a world where obviously there's a lot of fracturing in politics, a lot of fracturing in division and other. The one thing that can bring people together is being a part of a fan group, or feeling a part of a community that goes very deep. It can be multi-generational, it can obviously, but it has a lot of parallels into kind of religious themes. Some would even say cults, this idea of pilgrimages. People go back to their alma maters and they're on a pilgrimage. When people obviously, we retire shirts, these are the legends. We all have our legends, and these legends go back obviously on multi-generations. Obviously this notion of what, and by the way, it's in both equal measure, but what you get, and you get nourished by community, you feel happier, you feel supported. A lot of the science behind this is definitely the statistics around support, happiness, ability to kind of be a bit more objective. You certainly consume more media. There is obviously some very practical applications. You belong to lots of groups, but I think in this haptic and digital age, what does it mean to be analog, on and offline? Well, one of the great connectors is the community of fans, and we all have it, by the way. Everyone looking at this video probably has a fan group, whether it's WhatsApp groups or people that they meet in the pub, or just, having a conversation at the office or in your work life and your leisure life. It's pervasive in the way that maybe religions were in one era. And the final thing is that, if you're in the stand of a Kansas City or at a World Cup, you can literally be cheek by jowl with people from other worlds, other experiences, but you share one beautiful thing. The beautiful thing is the game, but it's also supported by the community.
It's all about the game, it's all about the community, and the way sports media has evolved to include creators, community, commerce. That has obviously changed things from a media standpoint. So how do you help brands navigate all that new complexity?
I think fandom, I look at it obviously through, let's express it through sport. Obviously it's multidimensional, it's fractured, it's really omni-channel. So I know I'm using a marketing term here, but it's everything. Every platform, every screen, every connection point is, so it's the microcosm. If you take and want to be involved in sport as a brand, it's the microcosm of obviously what you should be doing holistically as a brand. Everything communicates. So how do you bring together all of those parts? How do you orchestrate it? How do you activate it? How do you turn up? What's the empathetic underpinning of becoming and getting the permission to be a part of a community? Equally at the same time, what is the framework and process to obviously do that? That's a real disciplined thing. Don't do it randomly. Obviously connecting, the sports athletes are mini media. The teams are franchises and media. Obviously the leagues are media, brands are media, consumers are media. We express it through obviously media channels. So obviously it's the microcosm, but increasingly for brands, it is a big central pillar. So the other thing is fandom is not mutually exclusive. It sits at the juxtaposition of a lot of other cultural things. But the final thing I want to say is, so there's obviously the EQ to the I, the process IQ, and then there's a double IQ, which is how do we orchestrate and look at everything that's driving a business outcome. We're in the commercial, creative and media platform business. So ultimately the data storytelling is something that we've doubled down within sport and even beyond sport and fandoms. But there's a nuance to measuring impressions and obviously then, of course, making an impression and really becoming a part of that community, which outlasts obviously even a time-based business outcome. It's obviously how do you build that over years.
Well, Paul, to pick up on that religious theme to fandom that you spoke about, tapping into that fandom for business outcomes is obviously a bottom line for brands, but how do you thread the needle by ensuring that these interactions don't become transactional?
Yeah, no, I think that's what you've got to, it's the authenticity. Listen, there is nothing wrong with buying media impressions via sport. Obviously that is but obviously if you're betting in the long term, you really are trying to tap into fandom. And actually brands often even say, we would obviously love our own fans, and that intersection. Some brands obviously have more permission than others, but what I would say is, so how do you've really got to think about, the word I've used actually is permission, this notion of how do you earn this permission in the short, medium and long term. How do you connect a big anthemic idea like a big sponsorship to grassroots? That's also something for some brands that it can be very important, that you actually, your behaviors, so what you do is as important as what you say. So doing things that enhance the fan experience at all levels is something that brands have got a great role in doing it. I mean, pouring rights obviously is one end of the spectrum. Certainly if you're a beer brand or you're a beverage brand, you get that. Or if you're, you're in so many different entry points that you can do. But I think it's really thinking about, deeply thinking about the strategy and then the execution. And by the way, and then what we do when we do it and how we do it to drive the business result.
So Paul, looking a bit towards the future tentpole events, future seasons of sports marketing, where are the biggest opportunities for brands that maybe don't have massive sponsorship budgets? Yeah,
I really love the idea. The one beautiful thing about the new media era we're in is that obviously media became obviously wide and deep. And I'm even using the media word with, platforms and otherwise. So in the old days, we were in America quite limited and there was huge emphasis around the big four, the big five. Now we have the big, medium and small. So there's an entry price and an audience for almost every brand, so your entry point. But a lot of the strategies behind it, some brands can actually get in early on something that could obviously emerge as a fantastic sport. In the sports report, we're really doubling down. One of our predictions is that volleyball, in particular women's volleyball, is an incredibly exciting. It's really growing in popularity across colleges in this country. Now's the time to get into it. And by the way, a lot of people are saying, well, we've missed the boat on women's sport. No, you haven't. Women's sport has obviously exponentially grown in the last few years, and it will continue to grow and grow and grow. And our science and our report talks about the extra impact you get from people and young girls and women actually seeing themselves depicted. By the way, I support lots of women's teams. I love it. It's a different fan base. It's a different kind of passion. So, you can get even more what we call bang for buck, so to speak, in some of these sports. Apple is doubling down on F1. The NFL, I think, is on 12 platforms. That's the big 800-pound gorilla in the sports environment. But if you can't afford that, you've got so many other opportunities. Or if you've got a more upscale market, you can go after, your traditional areas like golf and others. But Formula One has emerged as a great sport. Women's sport is fantastic. So I would say that there's an entry point now for everyone. But I think the thing is, be purposeful. Think about your long-term strategy. Think about it not campaign by campaign. Some of our brands that we've worked on have had 16-year associations with franchises and with leagues, and their association now is exponentially worth more. So do think of all the different techniques. I have an idea that I created at a prior company and at Columbia University, and it's kind of the periodic table of content. So everything has multiple techniques, channels, KPIs. So obviously when you're looking at a sports strategy, what is your holistic brand story around sport or sports or fan, and obviously AKA fans, that's who we're after. And then really think of all the techniques you're going to use when and how. But the important thing I think you're mentioning is we've got great entry points almost for every brand today.